As a landscape photographer, there's nothing like capturing a flaming sunrise or sunset. Now, of course, we don't always need this nor want this in our images, but it is quite special when it happens. I've got to say though, it can be a little bit challenging, especially if you're not used to capturing such dynamic light and then processing the rich colors that we get in a sunrise or sunset. You might be a little bit disappointed when you get home. I know I was when I first started my photography journey. So in the video today, I want to share some tips to help you with not only capturing the sunrise or sunset, but specifically the processing of your raw files. We've had some amazing light here lately, and thankfully I've been running workshops for these exact moments. It's been quite unforgettable. Now, I've pulled up 3 different images, and the first thing that you might notice, all 3 are quite dark, and that is on purpose because when it comes to shooting backlight, which you might typically do in your sunrise or sunset, if you want to look at the sun itself, you're going to have a lot of backlit subject matter. So in this case, mountains and valley, mountains and lake foreshore. Now, my first tip is, and you might be doing this already, but it's really important in these moments, exposing for the highlights. So basically adjusting your settings. And if you look at my histogram here, you see that I'm just letting the highlights clip slightly, but not too much. And then all the shadows, what I'll do here in post is lift these shadow details up. Now, I gotta say, 10 plus years ago, you wouldn't do this. You would need to take multiple exposures in bracketing mode in order to capture that dynamic range. But you can see here in a single exposure, how much detail we still have all in those shadows and minimal noise. So keep your ISO low, expose for the highlights. Let them clip a little so the shadows are not too dark, like I have in this one here. And then when we raise up those dark tones, everything is in there. If you do not do this, if you try to get your dark tones bright out in the field, what's going to happen is the sky will be completely overexposed and your camera will struggle to retain the highlight details. You won't be able to come back here in processing and recover them. They're probably gone. So majority of cameras, especially those built in the last 10 years, they have pretty big dynamic ranges, and that dynamic range is going to allow us in a single exposure to capture this detail and reveal those details later in post. It just means you can't necessarily do it on the back of the camera out in the field. We're collecting data in the field, and then here in our raw file processing, we reveal the data, the details. We might lift up the dark tones like this, and then we might start to recover those highlights. So shoot for the highlights, let light in until the highlights start to just overexpose slightly. Leave it there, that way you're getting a nice bright file, so the shadow recovery is not too high. And then when we get here in the processing, we can begin to do the shadow recovery. So if we work on this one, I'd bring up the global exposure, and now the highlights, I'll drop those down slightly. I'll also bring up the shadows slightly. And then from this point, I would push K for an adjustment brush and then begin locally adjusting. So I'd darken this top portion of the sky, for example. I'd push K for a new brush, and this time I'm going to lift the shadows and blacks and just gently reveal some of these distant areas. That creates a sense of depth. Anything further away should have a decreased tonal range like so. And then where the light is itself, we could always just warm that up a little further with some temperature. And even if we want to brighten that up, just to really bring the eye through to that specific point. So even that quick edit, you can see how quickly we start to reveal the details. So another point and tip that I want to share with you guys is color grading. You'll find with these really amazing sunrise or sunsets, obviously there are a lot of warm hues. But if you look closely and observe when you're out in the field, we still have some cool tones as well, particularly in shadows, which we're getting back here in the mountain, the shadows on the cloud. I think it's really nice to lean into that color contrast that we do get in the golden hours. Cooler shadows, warmer highlights. Now, initially you might find that yes, these files are just way too warm in general. It's just the way the camera may pick it up. One way to get around that is to go down to the color grading tab, and this is where you might want to experiment with moving the midtones into a bluer hue, like so. So I click and drag now and bring that inside wheel, inside circle down to the blues, And then even with the shadows, we may want to bring the shadows into the blue, cool that down a little. And then back again with your highlights, you may decide that you want to change the hue there, maybe more of a yellow or orange, or you want to lean into the reds, personal preference. But I really like to just experiment with kind of neutralizing the frame a little, and if anything, going for those cooler mid and shadows, and then warming the highlights, even though the highlights are going to be warm anyway, but you may want to experiment with adjusting them. This Milford Sound one's a great example here. So I'll just recover that sky using the brush, and you'll see that the cooler tones are up there, but we've certainly lost them. So I'm just gonna straighten this up. Gotta have it straight first, guys. Should have done this in the field. There we go, didn't need much. And we'll just start to bring up some vibrance and saturation. And I'm gonna do a global cooling first. And now let's go and jump in to the color grading, and let's see what we can do here. Cool down these mids and cool down those shadows, and then we can warm up those highlights a little like that, which is quite red. We'll just lean into the orange more. And then to create the sense of depth with these backlit subjects, you can locally reveal the details. So we can raise up some shadows, raise up some blacks on a brush using the adjustment brush again. And if you haven't seen me process before, you know that this is more or less the only tool that I need or use. So we'll lift those darker tones like that. Now, of course, whenever you recover details like I have now, we still need to keep in mind that where the sun is, the light, it needs to be relatively bright to adhere to logic. So I'm just darkening the edges with the brush now. And then where the sun is, right in there, I need that to be a little brighter. So with this brush, I'll bring up some exposure, maybe some yellow. I'll rehaze, which will just reduce the mid-tone contrast back here. And there we go, a little bit more warming, probably not as bright, but I'll just turn that one on and off. So it's really nice to just have that indication of light back there. We need that little highlight and bright area. Otherwise, it's all going to be a mid-tone, which doesn't really make sense when you're looking at the sun itself. We need to have those brighter values, so even that's lifting the whites a little. Don't be afraid to let the highlights clip partially. That's more than fine. It's going to look natural, because at the end of the day, it is a highlight when you're looking straight at the rising or setting sun. This one here, I'm just going to bring this down into a 16:9, just so it's a bit tighter. I had that in mind when I captured this. And this one has an extreme dynamic range. So if we lift up some of the exposure, recover some of those highlights, and again, don't recover all the way. If we go right down, this is amazing what you can do with these cameras, how much we can recover. I think it looks normal actually letting that be whiter instead of 100% recovered and being yellow. So I'd leave that slightly brighter, bring the shadows up, and then we jump into the localized adjustments for the depth. So distant areas, getting lighter shadows. Immediate foreground down here can remain dark, and same as the top part of the sky. Those areas are closest to us, so they should be darker in tonality, especially when it comes to the blacks and shadows. And then as we get into that distant area, that's where we start to get that decrease in tonal range, just how a painter would approach the scene. And then of course, like we looked at on the Milford sunset, where the sun itself is, I'm going to brighten that up a little. So I've just added some brightening here with the whites coming up, some exposure. I may rehaze slightly, that'll lift the dark tones. See that? The darks are getting lighter again, just looks really pleasing on the eye, anything far off in the distance. So very quick edits. I'm not saying these are done by any stretch of the imagination, but hopefully you can see how you can recover that dynamic range. Now, I wouldn't normally process this fast, obviously, but I just want to encourage you guys, the next time you get those really vibrant sunrises or sunsets, shoot for the highlights. Let's lift the details in post. This might be familiar to you, or it might be very unfamiliar. It's a different way to photograph the landscape. When you're starting out in landscape photography, you might be not getting such dynamic light, or maybe you've given up on it. You're putting your back to the sun. And when you do that, the light is much easier to capture. But if you want to really pick up this dramatic light, rich tones, expose for the highlights, experiment with it. If your camera is at least, newer than 10 years old, you should have the dynamic range there to do this recovery. Keep the ISO low so you're not getting too much noise when you do all this recovery. And then keep in mind the little tips about, darkening the top and bottom of the frame, lifting the tones in the back to create that wonderful sense of depth. So we start off with more contrast and decrease. So the blacks get lighter, lighter, lighter. And then keep in mind as well, where the sun is, that should still remain bright. Let's not recover it too much so it looks like a cartoon and defy logic. So we want to have highlights in our frame. We want to have shadows in the frame. Few quick pointers there. Now, if you want to delve even further, I've just released a longer masterclass on golden hour photography, sunrises and sunsets. All the raw files are included and we slow it down so you can follow along step by step and really go into all the different theory behind the processing as well as the shooting out in the field. So please check that out. I'll put the link below. Otherwise, just check out the rest of my YouTube channel as well. I hope that I can help you in your photography journey. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Cheers.